What if I told you that the most dangerous kings in history never needed crowns? That the greatest throne you can occupy isn't in a palace, but inside your own mind? It may sound counterintuitive, but maybe true royalty was never about ruling others, but about no longer being ruled from within. This video is an invitation to dive into that invisible territory where inner chaos needs order, where the ego must bow to purpose, and where the shadow needs to be looked in the eye. Over the next few minutes, you won't hear ready-made advice, you'll find mirrors, reflections that challenge, unsettle, and perhaps awaken something dormant in you. From birth, we're shaped by invisible structures, family expectations, social rules, cultural patterns. We grow up serving norms we didn't choose and rarely question. Modern slavery isn't made of chains but of implanted ideas. Becoming king of yourself requires an internal rupture, a courageous act that begins with the simple yet profound step of observing your own thoughts. The mind is the silent battlefield where personal empires are built or destroyed. Every unexamined belief is a fortress you don't know exists. And as long as these beliefs are commanded by external voices, be they familial, media-driven, or institutional, you'll be just a puppet that looks like an adult. There is only freedom where there is awareness. You must unlearn in order to begin to reign. And reigning isn't about commanding others. It's about taking responsibility for every choice, every reaction, every silence. It means becoming the architect of your own psyche, redesigning habits, confronting uncomfortable truths, and undoing what was learned without questioning. This awakening isn't sudden or romantic. It begins when you realize your life is being written with someone else's words. And there, in the silence of confronting yourself, arises the first spark of royalty, the autonomy to think, feel, and act on your own. The first kingdom to be conquered, after all, is invisible and lives among your most intimate thoughts. Power without purpose is like a castle without foundations, beautiful on the outside but about to collapse from within. Many wear the crown out of vanity, driven by the thirst for control, applause, or recognition. But without an existential compass, every throne becomes a prison of self. To lead requires more than authority, it requires clear intention, ethical direction, and commitment to something greater than one's own reflection. Walking in golden circles is the fate of those who confuse fame with meaning, influence with wisdom. The ego loves palaces but doesn't build lasting empires. It prefers the illusion of prestige to the quiet labor of consistency. That's why kings without purpose shine brightly and decay quickly. They are idols of the moment but never references for the eternal. Purpose works like an invisible sword, it doesn't show but it cuts. It cuts through illusions, through excess, through distraction. It is what shapes true leadership, separating service from spectacle. And this sword is forged only in the fire of reflection. Why do I do what I do? Who is my strength for? What would justify my authority if no one were watching me? The answer to these questions doesn't need to be grand, but it must be true. A king with purpose rules with serenity, because he knows his throne is internal and his mission is greater than his ego. The difference between a tyrant and a leader isn't in the crown, it's in the cause. The story of kings has also always been the story of masks. Machiavelli, with his ruthless precision, revealed an uncomfortable secret. Real power is rarely enforced by force but by perception. What others see or think they see shapes how much you can command, inspire, or intimidate. And for this reason, image becomes as strategic as action. We live in times where seeming is often more impactful than being. But that doesn't mean falseness, it means awareness. The image you project can be your armor, protecting your essence while it matures. Or it can become your prison, if you start living to maintain appearances that no longer reflect who you are. Governing your image is, therefore, governing your symbolic territory. Being strong is an internal value, seeming inevitable an external movement. Inevitability in this context is not arrogance but coherence. It's when your presence communicates clarity, firmness, and vision, without needing to demand respect. People like this don't need to shout because coherence speaks for them. Their gestures, words, and choices create an aura that needs no explanation. But there's a subtle danger here. When image replaces purpose, the imposter is born. And he, no matter how charismatic, will always be a slave to applause. The true king uses his image as an extension of his character, not as a disguise for his shortcomings. He knows that seeming inevitable is not manipulation, but embodiment, day after day, of what he truly wishes to represent. Within every king lives an exile. It is the shadow, that repressed, denied part that carries the most uncomfortable traits of our identity. Carl Jung described the shadow as all that the ego refuses to see in itself. And it's precisely that refusal that makes us slaves to our own impulses. As long as the shadow is not integrated, it is what rules from behind the throne. True psychic royalty is not won by defeating external enemies, but by confronting inner monsters. Envy, pride, fear, the compulsion for control. When ignored, these aspects grow in the dark and influence decisions, sabotage relationships, and erode integrity. Mastering these monsters doesn't mean eliminating them, it means recognizing their existence, embracing their origin, and deciding with clarity. The king who doesn't face his shadow makes decisions fueled by unacknowledged resentments. He creates laws to control what he cannot master within himself. He becomes harsh to hide his fragility, authoritarian to mask insecurity. The unexamined shadow becomes the hidden advisor of every subtle failure. The tragedy is that he believes he's in control, when in fact he's a prisoner of what he's repressed. But there is a nobler path. When the shadow is brought to light, it becomes strength. It offers forgotten resources, once feared potential, and an emotional depth that only those who have truly looked at themselves can access. There is a silent royalty in every human being, but it is rarely awakened in the noise of ordinary life. The archetype of the king, present in mythology, psychology, and dreams, represents order, generosity, and balance. It's not a fantasy but a latent psychic possibility. And it only awakens when we stop seeking validation from the outside and begin to listen to the inner compass. Society has many bosses but few true leaders. That's because we confuse power with imposition, and authority with superiority. The world doesn't need more external kings, adorned with titles and positions. It longs for sovereign minds, people who rule their own thoughts, respect their emotions, and align actions with values. This sovereignty begins with the decision to live with intention. Maturity is the invisible coronation of those who've passed through the dark night of the soul and returned with wisdom. It's not about age but about integration. It's when your wounds become portals, your pain becomes compassion, and your story becomes a legitimate throne on which you can sit, not to dominate but to serve. To serve clarity, the common good, what you know is right. This inner king doesn't shout, doesn't flaunt, doesn't need to prove anything. He exists to restore harmony starting within. His presence is rare because it requires surrender, silence, and courage. And that's why, when he awakens, everything around him transforms. Not with force but with direction. Not with brilliance but with presence. Like a calm lighthouse in the midst of chaos. Being king of yourself is, above all, an exercise in discernment. And to discern often means saying no with firmness and yes with presence. In a world that teaches us to please, to avoid conflict, and to seek approval, true internal authority is revealed when you choose consciously, and stand by your choices with integrity. Those who can't say no become servants of others' desires. A true king is not at the service of acceptance but of order. Order within internal chaos and, consequently, around him. He understands that his role is not to please but to align. And for that, he must be willing to disappoint external expectations when they threaten internal coherence. That is the difference between leadership and subservience. The former protects values, the latter collects smiles. The ability to say yes without fear is also a royal gift. It means acting without the shadow of doubt, without the echo of imagined criticism, without the weight of the past. It's a yes born of clarity, not of neediness. Saying yes out of insecurity isn't choosing, it's begging for belonging. Emotional autonomy is, then, the invisible throne of those who live in peace with their own decisions. To be king is not to need to justify every gesture. It is to be conscious of why you do what you do, and that's enough. The external world will continue to opine, judge, and test your limits. But true royalty is not shaken by outer noise. It anchors itself in inner silence. And in that silence is born the strength to rule with truth, even when the world prefers the comfort of lies. There is a form of leadership no one sees, yet it defines all others. The way you conduct yourself when no one is watching. Leading in silence means paying attention to the conversations you have with yourself, the ones that shape your self-esteem, your choices, and your capacity to endure pain. The mind, when left unchecked, turns kings into hostages. When aligned, it makes anyone a center of gravity. The internal tone of your thoughts determines the quality of your leadership. Do you speak to yourself with compassion or cruelty? Do your ideas lift you up or sabotage you? The inner king is forged in dialogue with chaos. And that requires listening, presence, and the courage not to flee from oneself. Before you command an outer kingdom, you must sit on the throne of your own psyche and reorganize your internal voices. Those who manage to govern themselves in this invisible space naturally inspire order in others. not through imposition but through example. Their presence radiates stability, not because they control everything, but because they've learned to navigate the unpredictable with integrity. A true leader doesn't try to fix other people's chaos, they carry so much coherence that chaos reorganizes around them. This silent strength isn't learned from leadership manuals, but in sleepless nights of doubt, in intimate confrontations, in tough decisions made without an audience. To rule in silence is to become your own guide. And only those who have been disciples of their own labyrinth can be beacons for others. The light you radiate depends on the darkness you've had the courage to walk through. The wisdom of the true king is revealed when he realizes his mission is not to be indispensable, but to become unnecessary. That is not resignation, it's maturity. It's when power no longer exists to control, but to elevate. Those who lead with clarity do not create dependence, but autonomous beings. A wise king sows seeds of sovereignty wherever he goes, even if it means being forgotten afterward. The greatness of a reign lies in how much it empowers, not in how much it subjugates. True power is that which frees. It allows people to discover their own strength, awaken their own vision, and move freely. A leader who traps those around him is, deep down, a prisoner of himself. He fears being replaced, fears silence, fears the end of idolization. That fear is the mark of immature royalty. Insecure kings need subjects. They feed off adoration, rituals of power, and constant validation. But a fulfilled king is self-sufficient. He sees his mission complete when others rise alongside him, not beneath him. He understands that his function is temporary, that his wisdom should multiply, not centralize. This is the difference between the empire of ego and the legacy of consciousness. When a king becomes unnecessary, he doesn't lose the throne, he transcends it. His authority lives not in decrees but in example. Not in applause but in echoes. He ceases to be the central figure and becomes a symbolic presence, a silent reminder that every human being can one day become king of themselves. And there is no greater power than that. Much is said about how power corrupts, but the truth is subtler and more uncomfortable. Power doesn't create monsters, it merely reveals them. When someone rises to power and starts acting with arrogance, cruelty, or vanity, those traits already existed in a latent state. The throne is like a magnifying mirror. It sharply reflects what was already fermenting quietly within the soul. Power in itself is neutral. It has no ethics, no direction. It's an amplifier of intentions, a spotlight on the psyche. Unresolved people turn power into a weapon. Mature people turn it into a bridge. Corruption, therefore, doesn't begin in the political structure. It begins in the emotional one. And that's why so many kings, upon rising, stumble over their own shadow. The position only exposes what they were already trying to hide from themselves. The psyche of a mature king is built on lucidity. He observes himself with rigor, knows his flaws, watches his impulses. His royalty doesn't come from seeing himself as superior, but from being transparent with himself. He understands that the throne doesn't make him more worthy, only more visible. And because of that, he takes care of himself, questions himself, refines himself. It's a daily work of inner vigilance, of applied integrity. Lust, vanity, unchecked ambition, all of these are human, but they cannot rule. When they do, they destroy. The wise king transforms these impulses into creative force, into inspiration, into purposeful action. He understands that power is a test, not a reward. It's a challenge, not glory. And in that understanding, he finds the key to true authority, self-awareness. To be a king is not to exercise domination, but to assume responsibility. And the deepest of those is to serve something greater than the ego. That is the essence of true royalty, to place strength at the service of good, vision at the service of the collective, and the self at the service of a calling. When power submits to purpose, it ceases to be vanity and becomes mission. Inner royalty is not a state of exaltation, but of integration. It is when action, ethics, and transcendence walk together. Action is movement in the world, firm, determined, transformative. Ethics is the internal boundary that prevents collapse into excess. And transcendence is the constant reminder that there is something greater, whether spiritual, philosophical, or existential, that guides our steps with humility. This trilogy builds a presence that doesn't impose but inspires. A true king doesn't need to command. His authority is recognized, not demanded. He serves because he understands that to lead is to care, to protect, to sustain a space where others can flourish. And that takes strength, but a strength born of commitment to the collective, not the need for self-assertion. All of this begins with a silent choice, to assume your own destiny. Without announcements, without audience, without external coronations. It's an intimate yes given amid chaos, when you decide to no longer outsource your life, your pain, your decisions. In that moment the king is born. Not the one who commands, but the one who serves and therefore reigns. In the end, this wasn't a script about kings, it was about consciousness. About the silent journey of those who choose to no longer be servants of their wounds, nor subjects to others' expectations. About claiming your own inner throne, not to dominate, but to serve a force greater than your own reflection. It doesn't matter whether you hold positions of power or live in anonymity. The sovereignty we speak of here has nothing to do with status, but with presence. It's revealed in how you make decisions, how you take care of yourself, how you take a stand. In how you respond to chaos, in how you uphold ethics even when no one is watching. And now I ask you, how many of your decisions were truly your own? How many of your yes came from courage? And how many from fear? What do you need to face within yourself to finally stop living like a subject and start acting like a king? If this reflection touched something in you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to wake up to themselves.